Good afternoon and welcome to Tafakari. If you're new here, Tafakari is a Kiswahili word that means to ponder, to contemplate, or to think deeply. It is the intention of this channel to create a space in which we can foster critical thinking for the purposes of devising effective solutions to meet the challenges of our times. So we carry on with our Decolonial AI development series, and today we shall be speaking about the concept of extraverted research. Extraverted research is a concept that was well articulated by the late Professor Paulin Hountondji from Benin, who happened to be an eminent philosopher. And he described extraverted research as a phenomenon in which African researchers investigate problematics that are non-endogenous. And what does that mean? We investigate research questions that are of interest to a Western audience. And so what that means in terms of implications is one, instead of engaging in a horizontal debate amongst each other as scholars, we end up engaging in a vertical conversation between us and global North scholars. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the problematics that end up being investigated are not endogenous, or rather are not in tune with the needs of the people. So that eventually what happens is that we are investigating problematics that are of interest to a Western audience. And this has implications in the sense that you find a situation in which Africa ends up being saddled by irrelevant knowledge, to use the words of Professor Sabelo. Because for as long as you're investigating research questions that are not of immediate interest to your people, then whatever is generated out of that cannot have lasting impact because it's not endogenous. And you can see the example of these in sectors such as agriculture, which I came from before I got into AI. And what would typically happen is that global North institutions set forth a theme of investigation and there's a call for proposals. So obviously, in as much as local African researchers would like to speak to context in terms of these things, because the problematic is not endogenous, you have a situation in which research is carried out, interventions are carried out, but they don't last beyond the project life cycle. That is how you find, for example, farmers day in, day out are involved in this intervention, that intervention, but beyond the project life cycle, things are not self-sustaining. So what's the way forward? The way forward is what he said. We want to work towards the goal of having autonomous, self-reliant processes of knowledge production and capitalization. And so what this means is that we sit down and talk amongst ourselves and ask what are the issues that plague us. So that way now the problematics that we're investigating are attuned to context. The problematics that we are investigating are of interest to our own people. And in that way, you have a self-reliant system of knowledge production and capitalization, to use his words. And so this has implications as we speak of decolonial AI development, because the phenomenon of extraverted research has related to the coloniality of knowledge, because the coloniality of knowledge refers to the privileges of Western ways of knowing, seeing, and imagining, as well as the assumption that Western knowledge is universal. And so by engaging in extroverted research, you can see that we privilege Western ways of knowing, seeing, and imagining to the detriment of context. And a turn from that, or a pivot from that, what we'd call the decolonial turn, would mean that, as he said, the problematics must arise from here. Because we are African researchers, we are in our context. So we need to know what are the problems that are of interest to our people. And as he says, anybody else who would like to help us investigate that is welcome. But they're welcome after we sit down and decide what is our problem statement. And this problem statement should be attuned to the situation of the people. And it's already a thing that is happening, like in AI. For example, you have grassroots organizations like Masahane who have made it their business to do African NLP. And that is an example of a situation in which we have problematics being determined by Africans. Because in the case of African NLP, the situation is to find out how can we expand the representation of African languages in AI tools that are being developed. And this is an important question because Africa is a linguistically diverse place with more than 2,000 plus languages, according to the records. Yet, that diversity is not seen within the current AI tools. And what that means is that Africans, many of them ordinary Africans, are not able to use these tools. So by focusing on that, you're directly addressing a problematic that is of concern to people in your context. Another example which I really like is this year's Indabas theme, which I noticed in one of the previous newsletters, where they said our issue is not AGI. We are interested in sovereign AI. Because right now, there's a current race towards AGI, but that's not Africa's problem. Our problem, as we've said so many times on this channel, is that we want to have agency over all phases of the AI life cycle. And so our problem is a sovereignty one. And so you can see how, by sitting down within ourselves, we are able to investigate things that are attuned to context, so that we can be able to sit down and say, it's true, the world is going against this, is going along the trend of AGI, but us here, we are yet to even have complete sovereignty over all phases of the AI life cycle. So can we focus on that? So that's what I had for you for today in a nutshell. And just to recap, we said that decolonial AI development is, or rather has the goal of ensuring that Africans have control over all phases of the AI life cycle. But because AI is steeped in coloniality, any attempt to do that would need us to turn away from that. Hence why we speak about decolonial AI development. But this is a process. First of all, we have to understand, how does coloniality arise? And second, how do we pivot? And so in today's program, we were looking at coloniality in the form of extraverted research and saying that if we are to design AI that is attuned to the needs of Africans, then we need to pivot from extraverted research to one in which problematics that arise are those that African researchers themselves develop. And this is based on the needs of context, the needs of country people. And that way then, we are able to design tools that resonate with people, and that way end up being self-reliant. So that's all that I had for a nutshell. And until next time, kwaherini.